At the beginning of 2015, then U.S. President Barack Obama invoked the Leahy Law against Nigeria by allocating a mere $700,000 and blocked the sale of Cobra helicopters to the West African country. It occurred at a time Nigeria was in the thick of a war against insurgents in the northeast and needed all the foreign support and military hardware it could get. However, the Obama administration thought otherwise because of what it termed gross human rights violations by the Nigerian military in the war against Boko Haram. It took the Republican administration led by President Donald Trump to lift the embargo on military assistance with the sale of 12 Super Tucano aircraft to Nigeria. Now with President Joe Biden, another Democrat at the helm of affairs in the U.S., the spectre of another unequal application of the Arms Export Control Act, otherwise known as the Leahy Amendments, again looms over Nigeria. The Leahy Laws or Leahy Amendments are human rights laws that prohibit the U.S. Departments of State and Defense from providing military assistance to foreign security force units that violate human rights with impunity. To discuss the recent threat by U.S. Secretary of State Antony J. Blinken to apply the Leahy Laws against Nigeria if allegations of rights violations are found to be credible, we're now being joined by Professor Bolaji Akinyemi, former Foreign Affairs Minister and former Director General of the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs. Welcome to the show, Professor Akinyemi, and good morning.
Good morning, Dr. Abati. Good morning, Ms. Abiola, and good morning, Mr. Hosseini.
Morning, sir.
Thank you very much for inviting me to your show.
Well, Prof, thank you very much for joining us too. But very quickly, let's start with the symbolism, the significance of the three-nation visit by the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. He visited Kenya, Nigeria, Senegal. Well, in all three countries, he talked about democracy, partnership with Africa. It was his first visit, and he seemed to have enjoyed himself very much, including showing off his French in Dakar. But really, what do you make of that diplomatic shuttle across Africa?
Well, I think the trip was significant, and it showed what I will call the fractures between the then President Obama and the then Vice President Biden, between Kerry, who was Secretary of State, and between Antony Blinken, who was the Deputy Secretary of State, in the sense that while the Obama administration treated Nigeria with contempt, it looks to me as if coming, including Nigeria, on this trip was a signal that the Biden administration intends to take Nigeria seriously. Obviously, and he said it in his speech, that he, at least the Biden administration, recognized, in spite of all our problems, that Nigeria was still an actor to be reckoned with within the international community, and that the future development in the world needs Nigerian voice. So that to me was significant. I hope you remember that even Obama flew to Ghana when he came on his African trip and ignored Nigeria. So that to me, that's the first significant thing. Secondly, I don't really endorse the interpretation of Blinken's comment on the Leahy Amendment and its application possible application to Nigeria. He really didn't warn Nigeria. The way the question was posed to him, of course he couldn't say the Leahy Amendment is irrelevant. He wouldn't dare. It was an act of Congress. So he dealt with it from my own reading and listening to him. He dealt with it as a theoretical construct. Of course, if there are human rights violations, obvious and probably immense, of course, it will trigger the Leahy Amendment. But they seem to have recognized the enormous security issues that Nigeria faced. And don't forget, and he kept saying, and I think I recognize this as humility on his part, that even the United States forces often have problems in the field. And so you may then have to look behind what may be accident and what may be intentional, violation of the human rights. I would, however, like to warn that American speech writers are very good at flowery expressions. So his speech to Africa and the several comments that he made in Nigeria here, of course, indicate a positive disposition. But that is what it is, disposition. A lot of the commitments he was making will need decisions by Congress, whether it is in terms of voting the funds that will be used for the projects that they have in mind, and often this congressional approval don't come, or they don't come on time. So I really wouldn't want Nigerians to hold their breath that $2.something billion of the United States is already knocking on the door of the CBN. That's one. The second thing is, and that is the American tradition, or I should say the Western tradition, or I should say the global tradition, where you vote money, you don't get your hands on all that money. In fact, depending on how good you are at negotiating, most of that money will be spent on American personnel, American goods, American services. When I amended my initial statement to end up with global practice, of course I have in mind even what the Chinese are doing in Nigeria, up to installing notices in Chinese on railway routes. And in spite of how good Nollywood is, I understand, I haven't been on the trains, but I understand that it is Chinese films with subtitles that they play on the railway station. So it's a syndrome. It's a syndrome of donors to use as much of the money as they can, promoting their own interests. And yet you still pay back in full, hard-pressed and measured.
Wow, thank you for that, sir. So I have two questions for you. So I'm going to start with a headline in this day newspaper that says, in double standard, U.S. threatens Nigeria with arms embargo while silent on Israel. What do you make of that? And secondly, what do you make of our inclusion on the religious freedoms blacklist by the Trump administration and the subsequent removal by the Biden administration?
I think that, thank you, Tundu, for those two questions. The first one, look, you only break your heart if you expect the United States to treat you the way it treats Israel. And this is not hate speech on my part. I know better than to do that. But Jewish voters in the United States are very, very critical to the electoral success, especially in presidential elections. And there's no presidential candidate and no administration that will go out of its way to antagonize Israel or to do anything that may be perceived by the Jewish voters as being inimical to Israeli interests. They have a powerful voice in the media, which they will be prepared to use. I won't mention names, so there will be no ad hominem attacks on my part. But there are powerful voices on one of the global media in the United States who are, who have worked for Jewish interest, public interest organizations. They won't put it on. If you go and look at their profile, that will have been removed. So you will think that they are neutral, whereas they are not neutral. Like hawks looking after his chicks, those voices are looking after Israeli interests. Let me give you one illustration. I understand. I mean, I cannot verify it. I don't run an intelligence agency. But I understand that there was a time when the Mossad, the CIA detected that the Mossad was planning to assassinate an American president. And I understood it took a call from the director of the CIA to Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel at that time, that if they tried anything funny, Israel would regret it for the rest of his life. Now, whether true or not, I don't know. But to think that if that had been any other country, or American B-52 bombers would be coming over that country before you could even finish breakfast. But Israel got away with it. And of course, you will recognize or you will remember Netanyahu's rudeness to Obama because Obama was not perceived as being pro-Israel enough. So there's no basis for you to try to differentiate between American attitude towards Nigeria and American attitude towards Israel. That difference is very, very clear. Your second question, what was it? So don't remind me, please.
Yes, sir. It was inclusion on the religious freedom blacklist by the Trump administration and subsequent removal by the Biden administration.
Yes. I think that was simply a positive move by the Biden administration because a decision had already been taken that Nigeria will be a participant in that democratic construct that Biden is trying to make the cornerstone of his foreign policy. And so to that extent, they needed to make some positive gestures towards Nigeria. But do keep in mind that there is again a commission that disagreed with the State Department and said that no, there are still sufficient dysfunctionalities in the way the Nigerian government is reacting to violation of religious rights in Nigeria. Of course, the State Department is the official voice of the United States. And whether what the State Department was saying is that these nefarious actors, especially in the north, are clobbering the head of both Muslims and Christians, and that therefore there's no partiality in the suffering, rather than that there is no animosity among the religious groups. It's not really clear to me, because everybody can see that churches, mosques, reverend fathers, students in Christian schools, as well as students in Muslim schools, are being kidnapped, are being killed, are being brutalized. So we have a religious problem in Nigeria. But what the State Department is probably saying is that we share equally the sufferings of the two religious groups that we have.
Okay, so I'll piggyback on the point you made as regards, the what the State Department said as regards religious records in Nigeria and all of that. And I'd like to ask this: why is it that after all of those overtures that Americans gave to Nigeria when they came, the minute Anthony Blinken went back to America, then he started pushing this agenda of, a Leahy Law? Could it be diplomatic? And secondly, secondly, why is it that while they were having the joint statement, that's the Foreign Minister of Nigeria and Anthony Blinken, there was a touchy issue on China, and the Foreign Ministry of Nigeria was, trying to put flowery words around it and say it's a case of cost and all of that. But when you watch the body reaction of Anthony Blinken, he was not happy about the fact that China has done a lot in Nigeria as regards infrastructure. That's another angle to it. So what is really happening? This undertone about China? And why is that the Americans are not offering any better deal, as in terms of infrastructure and the likes?
You recall what I said earlier, which is that Americans are first-class speech writers. And you've got to deconstruct what you're talking about, or the real meaning of what they are saying. It struck me when he was I don't know whether it was when he was talking to the president or talking to the foreign minister, when he said, we are not here to compete with anybody, and we are not here to ask you to make a choice, but, and it's that but that interested me, but we can do better what others are doing. And that struck me that that's the competition right there. Of course, they are not happy. They will not be happy, because there is a new world order coming up. It's already growing. And Russia is not going to be the main competitor with the United States. It is China. A figure came out 3 days ago. I don't remember the institution that released the figures, but it showed that in terms of the economy, China has overtaken the United States. Of course, militarily and strategically, America is still #1. But in terms of the economy, China has become #1. We are not going to be happy about this because this is a challenge, a natural challenge to the leadership and control of the new world order that is being put in place. And perhaps this even relates to the issue Dr. Abati raised at the very beginning, that this is part of why Nigeria was chosen. What and all, we are still a powerful voice to be reckoned with in Africa and in the world. This is not just, jingoism on my part. You see, our security forces behave badly in Nigeria. When they go abroad, they are first class. I monitor the United Nations Award for Excellence in the places where they have peacekeeping operations. And Nigeria is always rated very highly. It's when they come back home that the Nigerian factors kick in. This is not a secret to these global powers. Number two, in spite of the battering that our economy gets, if you look at the GDP, the gross domestic product, and the GNP, the gross national product of Nigeria, you are not going to come to the conclusion that this is a country that you can sniff at. Now, I am aware of the report that came out even while the Secretary of State was here about Nigeria being 2 minutes towards collapse. And one retired general called me and said, are these American think tanks laying the ground for American military involvement in Nigeria? Because what that report was saying was Nigeria must not be allowed to collapse, or else the consequences and the implications for the exit of Nigerians, they will overwhelm Europe, apart from overwhelming West Africa. And I had to tell the general that I don't know what the Americans are thinking, but that should be a signal to us to get our act together. So, in conclusion, I think that the Chinese factor in Nigerian-American relationship is always going to be the elephant in the room.
Well, Prof, I asked you earlier about the significance, the choice of those three countries, and the main themes, because oftentimes in this diplomatic business, there are cover stories, and then there is the substance. Now, in Kenya, Anthony Blinken was talking openly about climate change, about clean energy, but we all know that Kenya is going to have general elections in 2022. Could that have been the main story in Kenya? Now, in Nigeria, okay, you've talked at length about Nigeria and what the issues were. Democracy, the largest democracy in Africa, should not fail. But at the same time, there were other things that were put into that basket. Democracy, COVID-19 vaccination, and all of that. And then in Senegal, Macky Sall is going to be the next chairman of the African Union. But openly, Anthony Blinken talked more about COVID-19 vaccination and what Senegal is doing with COVID and all of that, and partnerships that can be forged with Senegal. But in that same Dakar, later this month, there's going to be the China-Africa Summit. Could that be the main story?
You are right. There are always subtexts to these visits. The choice of the countries, I will interpret this way. Kenya, because of the problems in the Horn of Africa. Don't forget that even though Obasanjo is the AU point man in the Horn of Africa, especially in Ethiopia, the Kenya president, before the visit of the Secretary of State, had been on a visit to Ethiopia, trying also to talk to the different parties. The problem in Sudan, I suspect that Kenya was picked because of the instability and its role as a possible stabilizer in East Africa, in the Horn of Africa. That's probably why Kenya was picked. We were picked, again, for obvious reasons. He didn't hide the fact that the strategic position of Nigeria in the world and in West Africa and in Africa speaks for itself. Now, when often I say to people Nigerian strategic role in the world, they kind of open their eyes and look at me as if, well, Prof has gone round the bend. What strategic role in the world? The fact is, in developing a world order, it's like, what do you call, when you have pieces, different pieces, and you have to gradually put the pieces, the jigsaw puzzle, and you gradually put the pieces together in order to have that holistic picture that you are looking at. Nigeria comes with the African voice to that table. The United States is not going to sit in Washington and say, well, that the part of the jigsaw puzzle that is Africa, well, we will determine it in the Department of State. No. So, when I talk about Nigerian global stature in the world, I'm not saying that Nigeria is going to affect, it could influence, but I'm not saying Nigeria will affect what is happening in the United States or in Russia or in China. What I'm saying is that when it comes to the African input, Nigeria will definitely be recognized as that voice. Now, you may ask, why not South Africa? Yeah. And I will then, my answer, I've asked myself a question. My answer will be, recall what Nelson Mandela told Baba Hakim in that famous interview, that until Nigeria gets its act together and becomes a respectable member of the international community, the black community in the world will remain unfulfilled. He didn't say South Africa because he knows that developments in Nigeria are under the control of black people, not a white establishment. He recognized that the white establishment controls industries, factories, the economy of its own country. Whereas in Nigeria, we are not where we should be, but the solidity of where we are is because we are controlling it. So, and I think that's why we were picked. Senegal represents the Francophone voice now. It used to be the Côte d'Ivoire, but given the domestic instability in Ivory Coast, it is now Senegal. And of course, you've pointed out that the Senegalese are going to be the chairman of the African Union, the next one, and that's why he went there. But it is significant, however, that he was talking about the Senegalese development of COVID-19 vaccines. The Senegalese are way ahead of us. We destroyed our own capability for developing vaccines. We used to produce yellow fever vaccine, smallpox vaccine, and all kinds of vaccines. First at in Yaba here, and then at Vom in Jos. But like everything else, maintenance is our problem. I mean, the vaccine development will need $20 million. You will allocate $5 million to them and ask them to get on with the job. It simply didn't work. So we destroyed our capability, but Senegal is far ahead of us in that, and I'm not surprised that he emphasized cooperation with Senegal in that area.
Well, thank you very much, Prof, for joining us on the morning show today. Thank you very much indeed.